Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jeff Morgan. I'm from Dallas, Texas. The reason I'm here is because I have two grandchildren, Cruz Morgan, who's now 3, and Gideon Morgan, who's now 2. Last year, they were 2 and 1 when the incidents that I'm going to describe happened. When I saw the death of Leiliana Wright in the paper, of course, like everybody else, I was appalled. It was tragic. But I started to watch the columnists and seeing how people were saying, well, what we need is more money, we need more workers, but I didn't see a lot of talk about reform. And that's the part that I'd like to speak about just a little bit. According to Chapter 41 of the Texas Civil Practice and Remedies Code, gross negligence. What is gross negligence? It's an act or an omission which, when viewed objectively from the standpoint of the actor at the time of its occurrence, involves an extreme danger of risk, considering the probability and magnitude of the potential harm to others, and of which the actor has actual subjective awareness of the risk involved, but nevertheless proceeds with conscious indifference to the rights, safety, or welfare of others. In July of 2014, I started taking care of my grandchildren. Over the next 9 months, I probably watched them at least 80 times. I have a schedule in some court hearings showing all the times that I was watching them. I worked out of state, so I was not even in Dallas most of the time, but I was continually watching them, taking care of them, making sure the medical needs were taken care of. My youngest grandson at the time was 2 months old. He had to have surgery. I paid for the surgery. Just multiple things that I had done. Spent hundreds of hours and thousands of dollars taking care of our grandchildren. On April 22nd, 2014, my daughter, Stephanie, took Gideon, and he's the younger of the two, into Children's Hospital in Dallas. Before she did that, she gave me a call, and she texted me, and she said, "Dad, can I get your insurance information?" And I said, "Sure, what do you need?" And she started to tell me, so, well, Gideon has an infection, I'm taking him into the hospital. And well, she wasn't sure at that time, and I said, well, see the doctor and everything. And eventually she went down to the hospital. Being as I was out of state, I called my wife, and my wife was watching my own stepson. He's 25 years old. He was born, he had an in-utero hemorrhage. He was born dead. He was resuscitated and revived. So you can only imagine the depths of his medical needs. We live in a house that is specifically set up for his needs. We've got track systems, we've got breathing machines, he can't eat for himself, he can't bathe himself, anything along those lines. He's completely dependent upon others for all of his needs. He's got 24-hour daycare, or 24-hour nursing care. And because of the situation with my grandson, my wife went down to the hospital and helped out the way that she could. I got back a couple of days later. And I was watching my other grandson then, which was Cruz. 4 days after he was admitted, Gideon was released from the hospital. This was on April the 25th. And I was watching Cruz at the time. My daughter came down and picked up Gideon. And I thought everything was fine. I had no idea that this was going to be the last time that I'd be holding my grandchildren. She texted me this the following morning. This was on April 26th. Because on April 25th, CPS came to her house. So you did call CPS. You will never see my children again. You cross an unacceptable line, and our relationship will never recover from your slander and your actions. Go ahead and throw your fit. You will never have custody of my children. And thanks to you going after the one thing that matters to me, you won't see them either. You will not be present at my wedding. You will not know about my life. You will not know about my children. If you think what you did is justifiable in any way, you are dead wrong. And I mean what I say when I say you are no longer my father, their grandfather, or a part of our lives. Any man who would make false accusations of abuse because he doesn't get his way is a horrible, low person. I thought more of you, but since you just admitted to it, you can get and stay out of our lives. I'll be blocking your number. I had no idea what she was talking about. But I had warned her in the past about some things, and I said, Stephanie, you've got to watch out. My wife and I were there helping her with the kids. I said, you've got to make sure you do these things because Children's Protective Services, they don't work the way you think. They can see something and they can take your children. Or, they'll get involved in your life and you don't want them there. My wife and I were the primary safety net for my grandchildren. So anyway, I called up Children's Medical Hospital and in CPS, eventually I found out who the case manager was. Her name was Penny Hutchinson. And I begged Penny Hutchinson. I have 6 calls to her on April the 28th and April the 29th, telling her, please, I had nothing to do with this. Would you please tell my daughter that I had nothing to do with this? Would you please write her a letter? And this is where she said, no, we're not going to do this. She knew I had nothing to do with it. In fact, she interviewed me, she interviewed my wife, and she realized that because of our involvement in my grandchildren's lives, they had a strong safety net. But she allowed, intentionally, this to go on, the belief that somehow, in my daughter's mind, that I was the one who had called Children's Protective Services. I went and I spoke with her supervisor afterwards. Her name is Mia. She's now down in Austin, I believe. And she told me that, this is not policy for CPS, but it's best practice. Best practice is that we don't we don't intervene on behalf of somebody who might be being accused of making a phone call. So she let me be the scapegoat for Children's Medical Hospital. You would think, okay, so big deal, whatever, right? It got worse from there. Because of this whole thing that happened, my daughter just went ballistic. I had had 9 months with her. My daughter's life was being turned around. She had plans to go to dental school. We had gotten scholarships for her. We were watching the kids, anything that we could do to help her make a life for herself. So what did she do? She filed a protective order against me. She filed a false police report against me. I'm still working. I work for the government. I have background clearance checks. I've had security clearance, top secret and above. I don't think that I'm the person that they've tried to make me out to be by any stretch of the imagination. As I said, my wife is on long-term disability. She has autoimmune diseases. My stepson has 24-hour nursing care, as I mentioned. I am the sole income provider for our family. I am the sole person who provides insurance for the main insurance for my family. And my daughter was trying to get me convicted of a felony, which is what she told the police, and a protective order. So I spoke with my work and I said, what do I do? I mean, I have to be very upfront. I'm in a position of public trust. And they said, you've got to defend yourself. So we went through that route. During the court case which came up, my daughter, her ex-boyfriend, and my ex-wife got up on the stand. They all committed perjury. And the judge was listening to the whole thing. We had an hour for our side, and 50 minutes was spent just trying to show that they were lying in their testimony. Finally, the judge said, I was going to write the opinion a couple of times, but at the end she said, now that I've seen the evidence, I've got to give way to the evidence. My wife got up there and spoke. All of these things that I had been accused of just started to vanish one after another after another. This is the transcript from my trial for the protective. It's open. If anybody would like to see it, I would be glad to email it to them. I have pictures, multiple pictures of me with my grandchildren. And this is what convinced the judge. She said, this guy was being made out to be a monster. And yet you could see picture after picture after picture of just me loving the children and holding the children. Anyway, my attorney had fought for me, and I won the case. The judge refused to put a protective order on me. And as you probably know, in a situation where somebody's having a protective order, somebody's seeking a protective order against them, they probably will err with a person who's making the claim in case the guy actually comes back and kills them, and no judge wants to be associated with that. The judge completely denied the protective order. My attorney, who was a woman, said, do you have any idea how many men sit in jail right now? Innocent, but because a false allegation was made, they're in jail. She said, you're one of the lucky ones. And it was fortunate for us that I had documentation of everything, pictures, email, text messages. This is part of what I had. And I have more in the bag, and I've got more back at my house. So after the protective order, I had to face a criminal trial. I was called downtown to Dallas by Officer Quezada, police detective. He was trying to get me booked for a felony. And I was just dumbfounded. I couldn't believe this. Officer Quezada realized that probably my daughter was lying. He eventually said, well, okay, I'm going to downgrade it to a misdemeanor. Immediately he said that. Realized that none of these things had happened. But rather than dismiss the case, he sent me into traffic court with a misdemeanor. I had to defend myself for that as well, had another attorney. The case was dismissed. My record is still not expunged because I didn't go to trial, so being dismissed, I have to get my case expunged. That cost me $4,000. But that's not all. During the course of this time, my daughter's ex-boyfriend moved back in with her and almost killed her in front of my two children, my two grandchildren. And that's still not all. In 2 weeks, I have another daughter who's getting married. And because of this whole thing with CPS, which I got blamed for, she hasn't spoken to me for a year. Would not even let me know that she's getting married, did not invite me to the wedding. I'm sure that somehow you probably think, well, maybe he deserves all of this. Maybe he really is a rascal or some type of a, who knows what underneath this exterior. I've got a letter here from a coworker who said that in her opinion, I should have been given the Father of the Year award. And again, I've got the testimony of my wife here as well. All of this stuff I don't care about. What I do care about, my biggest heart, I guess, for my grandchildren. I can't tell you how much time I spent with them. And they just love being with us. And this whole thing could have been stopped had CPS just simply told my daughter, your father had nothing to do with this. So I think it's a case of neglect here. Not neglect like in the case of Leiliana Wright. But why could they not have done it? There is no policy that forbids them from doing it. It's best practice. And I think if best practice destroys family, you need to reevaluate what the best practice is. Everybody told me, almost everybody told me when the trials were done, said just walk away from it, just be glad. And I kept on thinking about my grandchildren. And I kept on thinking, they're going to say to me someday, Grandpa, why did you fight for us? And I tried to think about, how would they feel? Because, all of a sudden their grandfather, whom they spent so many hours with, is now gone. Where did you go, dear Grandpa? You never said goodbye. You'd always come and visit. Where did you go and why? You said you'd never leave us. You said you'd always be here, but Grandpa, we haven't seen you now for more than a year. We were always so happy together, doing all the things we do. Don't you remember the fun we had? What if we reminded you? You always held and loved us. You never let us down. You loved and hugged and kissed us and carried us all around. Why did you leave us, Grandpa? Why did you go away? We miss you very much. Would you come visit us today? So if you know our Grandpa, please help and do your part. Please tell him that we love him with all our little hearts. Grandpa, we can't forget you. And so many times we cry. We don't know where you went, dear Grandpa, or why you never said goodbye.